Today I'm going to be designing and crocheting 3 real-life monsters, otherwise known as cryptids, based only on their descriptions. Hello, it's Thursday! So something that has come up a couple of times on the Complicated Knots Discord now is a thirst for cryptids. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, cryptids are animals whose existence or survival is either disputed or unsubstantiated. Basically, there are people who believe these creatures are out there somewhere in the wild, but they are not really acknowledged by science. There don't tend to be photos, and the witness accounts tend to vary a little bit when it comes to the details. So that brings us to today. So what I'm going to do is read a couple of the descriptions from people who have claimed to have seen these creatures, and I'm going to try and design something based off of that. Now, just a quick disclaimer, I think by now we should all be aware that my style tends to run a little cutesy or cartoony, so if you're looking for some sort of horrible monster, this probably isn't going to be for you. So I'm just going to declare now that I'm not aiming for accuracy. I personally prefer just to candy coat things and make them look a little bit more cute than that. So that's what we're doing today. So the first cryptid I've selected is the Jersey Devil. This particular creature is said to inhabit the forests in South Jersey in North America. The description reads, a creature with the body of a kangaroo and the head of a horse with red eyes, claws, horns, and bat-like wings. Other details added by various witnesses include a forked or pointed tail, and whether or not it has arms or just wings seems to be a point of contention. I did a rough sketch to orient myself, then tried to make a better one. Its main claims to fame seem to be that it moves very, very fast, has a high-pitched blood-curdling scream, and that someone once dressed a kangaroo up as one trying to fool the local zoo. Then it was just the process of breaking the sketch down into pieces, planning how I would build each of them. The head, body and tail were pretty straightforward, and then it was just a bunch of smaller pieces like feet, haunches, horns. Now I did decide to go with team arms, as I thought it leaned into the kangaroo body description a little bit better. I also added a pouch for the same reason. Right, so I wasn't originally going to do the Jersey Devil, just because when I first read the description it wasn't super inspiring to me. However, as I sketched it, it became obvious pretty quickly that this is just a dragon. I'm not sure if this is just me, maybe I just want it to be a dragon because I want to make a dragon. But like, a head of a horse, body of a kangaroo, forked tail, bat wings, red eyes, horn, like no, this is clearly a dragon. With devil in the name, I fixated on reds. I usually avoid working in strong red and orange tones as they seem a little harsh and don't always record well, but for this guy it just felt appropriate. Needs another shade of red. I also think that I read it had glowing red eyes and the only thing that really stuck was red. As I stitched, I ended up combining the head, body and tail pieces into one combined piece. You can accomplish all sorts of interesting curves with enough increases and decreases. I was worried that I'd made him too short and too chunky, but luckily the stitch count went funky really early on and I hadn't noticed until I was nearly done. So I did end up frogging all the way back to the start of the neck to try and fix that. While I was there, I added a few extra rows of single crochet to give him a little bit more length. So I did cheat a little bit for the tip of the tail, and instead of reducing down to a single point, I finished off early, squashed the sides together and sewed them shut. It's a trick to get a pointy tip to something without having to fuss with tiny row counts. Now with a base made, I could focus on making all the tiny pieces I wanted to attach. In hindsight, I wish I'd introduced a different accent colour as this is red overload, but the bits all worked up pretty painlessly. For the wings, I ended up reusing the style of wings I used on my vampire bat a couple of Halloweens ago, but this time I added a finger claw using a picot in dark red. My camera could not resist the undeniable attraction of my tortoise pincushion, and no matter how I set the focus, it kept just wanting to make him the star of the show. But somewhere in the background, you'll see me assembling all of the pieces. So that was our Jersey Devil. Next up, the Chupacabra. While the Chupacabra seems to be mostly associated with Mexico and Puerto Rico, there have been reported sightings as far afield as Russia and the Philippines. It has been described as the size of a small coyote with reptile-like features and jagged spines protruding down to the tail. In the US, the urban legend looks like a tiny but vicious dog with fangs and giant muscles. Most of the sightings agree on the main details, but some of them do suggest that it can be as large as a bear, or believe it to be more alien than reptilian in appearance. He is known for drinking the blood of livestock, and there is some emphasis on goats. My takeaway from this description was basically buff and pointy dog lizard. I selected several more complex features to incorporate into my Chupacabra, so breaking it down into pieces was a super important step. In particular, I wanted to give him an open mouth to show off the fangs and some kind of snake or serpent tongue. But in order to do that, you need a head base, a face overlay, and a lower jaw, as well as the teeth and tongue pieces themselves, and it really does add a lot to the piece count. Right, so as you can see today, I have decided to lean more towards the small, buff coyote kind of angle. I did have to look up what a coyote was. I thought it was maybe like a small, like fox type creature, but I wanted to double check just to make sure, just because so much of this particular description hinged upon us knowing what that was. So this creature incorporates some of the hardest details to replicate in yarn, and that is those spikes down his back. And on top of that, I feel very strongly about the fact that his mouth needs to be open, showing off the fangs and the tongue. Of course, this also really ups the difficulty, but without them, how else is he supposed to suck on goats? I started by making the main body nugget, painstakingly lining up chartreuse picots down the centre of the spine. I work in a spiral, which can cause stitches to drift diagonally as you work, so the trick to keeping them relatively straight is every third or fourth row you work an increase on one side of the colour work or detail stitching, and then a decrease on the other. It pulls everything back into alignment and maintains your stitch count at the same time. I knew I would need to work my head up in layers, so it was going to be easier to do that with the head base as a separate piece to the body. This also gave me some flexibility regarding how I wanted to actually position the head without having to plan too far in advance. Based on the prompt, he needed to be fairly chunky, and I aimed to make the front of his body big and round and have his legs taper wider towards the top instead of staying straight. When attaching the legs, I would attach them slightly back from the front of the body to emphasize that curve of the chest. Then it was just a matter of building up the face. Now, the best bit about making a separate face piece is that you can hide all of your secrets under it, like tucking your eyes in to form eyelids and the tops of your teeth to make them look really ingrained. Crochet is a very soft medium that doesn't always handle corners or points well, so he was looking pretty derpy by the time I had made all of his bits. But then it was just a matter of sewing everything together as best as I could. So now that we've done the Jersey Devil and the Chupacabra, how about something a little closer to home? The bunyip is an Australian cryptid said to lurk in swamps, billabongs, basically anywhere there is naturally forming fresh water. And here's where it gets interesting. There is a lot of conflicting information coming out of bunyip sightings. Some describe the animal as having a round head like a bulldog and a body resembling that of an ox, hippopotamus, or manatee. Some say it resembles a seal, others mention a small head and a long neck, an amphibious appearance, or a brown furry mane, or even small tusks. The description offered me a lot to work with. Too much to work with. It was like the all-you-can-eat buffet of prompts. I ended up making a couple of sketches to work out which direction I wanted to go in. Right, so there are so many different creatures referenced in the various descriptions for this guy. At first I thought amphibian was the vibe, so kind of gave like a froggy head, manatee body, and kind of like the tusks and the big ears, which for some reason I keep drawing as French bulldog ears, but like it feels like the right vibe to me for some unknown reason. But then like I looked at it and it felt very kind of Loch Ness Monster and maybe just a little too plausible. I kind of wanted to lean a little bit more, fantastic. So that brought me to this little dude. So I'd already worked in red and green, so for my bunyip today, I decided to go with this icy blue and grey palette. I started by making the head. It worked up as a rectangle base, and then by adding rows of single crochet until it was a good height. I fussed about with the tusks and mouthpieces for a while, and basically ended up making them out of a big bubble and a small bubble that I could fold in half and manipulate into an upper and lower jaw. I ended up picking these purple and yellow eyes that I painted a couple of years ago. Now, I probably should have used red eyes, but something about these ones just felt right. Then I made the body as an elongated teardrop using the headpiece for scale. I added spots because I was feeling a little fanciful. I think they add just a little, something. The ears skewed very bunny very quickly, particularly with the colour blocking that I added. I tried to counteract it a little bit with their positioning on the head. The front feet in my original sketch were more like paws, but I experimented a little with different feet shapes and settled on something that was a little more amphibious, like a cross between a paw and a paddler. I nearly made his fluffy chest actually fluffy, but as I hadn't incorporated elements like that on the other two, I decided to go with more controlled ruffles. I really didn't know whether I was going to add back legs or not. I made one on a whim and I tried it both on and off. They weren't part of the original sketch, but eventually I decided that I liked how they took him into a more creature-y place, moving him away from his walrus aesthetic. And then it was time just to strip off all of the pieces and start assembling him in layers from the base up. Now, I did pull most of my information today from Wikipedia, so feel free to dispute it, correct it, or even just add to it in the comments down below. Also, if you'd like to see me try this again, don't forget to request your favourite cryptids so I know which ones to try next. Now, let's see how the bunyip turned out. So yeah, that's it for today's video. I hope you had as much fun as I did. So for more challenges like this, you can try this video here, or if you're looking for your next project, this way is the way to go. Okay, bye!